Hey guys, what's going on? It's Tyler Martin, and in today's video I want to talk about a very exciting update that just dropped in Notion, the brand new status property. Now at first glance this looks a lot like the single select property that we already have, and it really may not look like that big of an update. But there are a couple of features of this new property that I'm super excited about, and I can't wait to share it with you. And stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm also going to talk about what this might mean for the future of Notion. Let's jump right in. I've got this sample dashboard set up. It's just a freelance video editor dashboard. It's got some really simple databases in here. We've got a projects database, a tasks database, and a videos database. Everything is connected through relationships. Now, before we bring this new status property in, I do want to talk about the old way of doing this, because if I'm being honest, to me this is kind of a perplexing property to give us, simply because everyone has always used the single select property to track status across their database items, and I'm even a little annoyed because every database I've ever built, that's probably exaggeration, but most databases definitely have some kind of status property there, so I'm going to have a lot of editing to do over the next few weeks. But in essence, this is how everyone has always tracked status. We have this single select item. We can select to do, we can select doing, we can select done. I should have set this view up before I started this video, but we can also create a board based on the status, and we can drag it around Trello style. So from to do, to doing, to done, just like this. This is how it's always been done, but now we have a brand new way to represent status with this new property called status. I'm going to call this status 2. And let's bring in our status property. So you can see we have 3 groups here for our status, which are to do, in progress, and complete. We also have the option to show this as a checkbox or select. We're going to be working just with select right now. We will look at checkbox here in a second. So the first thing you'll notice here is that there is some pretty big cosmetic differences between the just single select property and the status property. And I really do like this new look for not started, in progress, and done. It adds a nice little aesthetic flair that we haven't really been able to get in Notion before without using, formulas to display different emojis based on different statuses and that kind of thing. This just builds that aesthetic right into it, and I am a fan of this new status property. Just like the select property, we can show this in a board. So if I come in here and edit this layout, change it to group by status 2. Now you can see we can drag things from not started to in progress to done, and it works just the same way as the single select. The biggest difference here is when you have a single select property, Notion doesn't really know what that is, right? You give things descriptions, but it's only for the user. However, with the status property, Notion does know what this is. It has a little bit more functionality built into it, which is very unique for a Notion property, and we'll get to that a little bit later on in this video. But what this means for us when we bring a database into a Kanban view like this, when we group it by status, Notion is going to know the order that it needs to put that into. If you'll notice, when I brought the single select property into this Kanban board, it was all out of order and I had to rearrange it, which really wasn't a big deal because there was just 3 of them. However, you'll see when we get down into the video section, we have a lot more than 3, and it takes time to sit there and rearrange everything every time you create a new Kanban view. With the actual status property, we're not going to have that problem. But there is a lot more that we can do with this status board. We have only scraped the surface, so let's keep going. Next, we have our task database. Again, this is all set up with these projects up here. So the old way of tracking tasks has been to use these checkbox properties, and then when you finish a task, you just come in here and you check it. Like the single select property, this doesn't mean anything in and of itself, at least to Notion. This only means something to the user. So you can give this functionality by coming up here and filtering this out. We're going to filter out done, and we're going to show only the unchecked ones. So that way when we come in here and we check off an item, it disappears from our to-do list. Well, now that we have this status property, there is a new way to track tasks that is a little bit more precise. We're going to call this complete, and I'm going to change it to our status. But this time, instead of showing it as a select, we're only going to show it as a checkbox. And we're going to go ahead and make this as narrow as we can. Just like the checkbox property, we can make this as narrow as the checkbox itself. I'm going to take my filter off of here for a second. Now, these really do look exactly the same. There is no difference between checking this with the checkbox and checking this with a status. The only difference really being that Notion knows the difference between what is not done and what is done. Now, when we display the status as a select, we have different options that we can move through, 3 different groups. When we display this as a checkbox, we only have 2 options, either not started or done. It's going to bypass that middle in progress status. We can see this by opening this up, editing the property, and showing it as a select. And now we can see that it's done. We show it as a checkbox, unselect it, and we can show it as a select again, and now it's not started. Now let's dig a little bit more into the composition of this status property. I've been talking about these as 3 groups: not started, in progress, and complete. And by default, there's only 1 item in each group. However, you can fully customize these to fit your needs, and in this example I have a videos database that tracks the progress of a video from an idea all the way through the video pipeline to complete. And again, like we've been doing, this is just a simple select property. However, let's bring in our status property, and we're going to show it as select. This time we're going to add to our groups. So if we can look at this, we have idea, to do, next up, and researching. These are all kind of in the to do category. Then we have pre-production, A-roll, first edit, B-roll, final edit, which I would consider as being in progress. And then the done category might have in review, scheduled, and fully complete. So let's add those into our groups. We're going to click edit property and add a status. Not started, I'm going to rename this to idea. And now that that's done, you can see that everything has the status of idea. In fact, let me exit out of this for a second and show you. Anytime I add a new property, it's automatically going to be shown here as an idea. That's because Notion's going to assume if you have a status property on a database, that every item in that database is going to start as not complete or as not started. This is already a level up over the single select property because when I add a new video in here, let's just call it sample video, I have to come in here and select idea if I want it to start out that way. Of course, you can come up here, you can add your filters so that any new item you create in that database automatically has those properties attached to it, but this is saving you that one extra step just by automatically giving it a status. So let's keep editing this a little bit. We've got idea, we've got next up, and we've got researching, and we can drag these around in the order we want. Idea, next up, researching, and if we wanted to change one of these to default, we totally could, but we're going to keep idea as the default. We can also change the colors in here if we want to, but I kind of like all of the colors being the same in each group. It makes it look a little more aesthetically pleasing, I think. Next up, we have in progress. I'm going to rename this to pre-production. Then we've got, A-roll, we've got B-roll, we've got first edit, second edit, and that's all I'm going to put here. And we'll go ahead and rearrange these. Pre-production, A-roll, first edit, second edit, throw B-roll up there. And down here we have complete, so we have done there. Maybe we will have scheduled and in review, just to give that a little bit of separation from the active part of the project. So now I can move my video through this video pipeline in a much more aesthetically pleasing way. And we can also make a Kanban board with this, so let's do that. We're going to group it by the property. I guess I never gave that a name. And here we can choose to either group the status by option or by group. So if it's by group, everything is going to be either to do, in progress, or complete. And you can see Notion even has these little icons here, which is really cool. I didn't know that until just now. I didn't notice that when I was playing around with this. So that is the status property in a nutshell. It is a nicer way and a more convenient way of displaying the status, and just a more functional way in general. But this begs the question, why would somebody use status over select? For instance, if you're like me and you have a ton of databases that track item status via single select, which databases should you go back in and edit, and which should you just leave as single select? Let me show you what I think is the most important part of this new progress feature, and it has to do with rollups. So for instance, let's say I wanted a rollup up here in my projects that showed me how many of my videos were complete. To do that, let's get a rollup. We're going to do a relation to videos. The property that we're going to be tracking here is the pipeline. And we want to calculate it by, oh man, I don't know. There is nothing here that we can do because Notion doesn't know the difference between all of our single select properties. So if we really wanted to make this roll up, we'd have to come down here to our videos database and add a new property, which was a formula. We'll change the type here to formula. And basically what we want to do with this formula is display a checked checkbox if a video is complete, and an unchecked checkbox if the video is not complete. To do that, it's just going to be a really simple if statement here. If our property pipeline equals, what is it, complete? I think it's complete. Then it's going to be true, not truer. Then it's going to be true. And if it's not complete, if it's anything else, it's going to be false. And I click done on that property. And we have this beautiful formula here. Now if I come in here and change a pipeline to complete, it's going to give us a checkbox. So that way, we can use the formula in our rollup here. Let's rename that from property to something more descriptive like completed videos. Now we can change this property from pipeline to formula. And we want to count the unchecked. Or no, we want to count the checked. That's going to tell us how many completed videos that we have. So we have one completed video in the wedding shoot, one completed video in the business event shoot. And let's find one in the Facebook commercial and complete that one. And there we go, we've got one video in each. And maybe one more just to show different numbers up there. Now we've got 2 complete videos in the wedding shoot. It's a really simple way of showing these multi-step statuses in rollups. However, now that we have this new status property, and again, I'm going to rename this property, let's call it status. This is going to be a lot easier. So we can even completely delete this formula because we don't need it anymore. Delete. Using just the status property alone, we can come in here with our rollup. The property that we want is status. And the calculate, we can either show the original and count all, which is something we've always been able to do with rollups. But now look at this, we can count per group, or we can show the percent per group. So I can come in here and count how many videos are complete. And now, look at that beautiful number, 0 of 4, 0 of 3. To display a summary like this without that status property would actually take a pretty complex formula to produce. Now we can do it just with rolling up a status property, and that's amazing. I love it. This to me is the most exciting thing about this new status property, and when I'm going back through my old databases, I'm probably going to leave all of them alone except for the ones that I've done this formula hack where I have the checkbox for the completed items. I am going to renovate those to display this new property feature because, whew, that's cool. I'm excited about that. And as far as I can tell, that's pretty much all there is to say about this new status property. I will say one thing that I was really excited about once I saw the design. You know, if we have just a regular checkbox, we used to only be able to resize it to right there, but now we can go all the way to the width of the checkbox. When I first saw the new design for this property and saw those little indicator icons, I got super excited because I was hoping we'd be able to resize this property all the way down to just the dot, which would be amazing. Unfortunately, we cannot. We are stuck to this width right here. But other than that, I love this new property. I definitely plan on using it in future builds and even in a few past builds as well. Now let's talk about what this might mean for the future of Notion, because to me this is a really strange property that they've given us. It doesn't really fit in with everything else that we know about Notion. Like we said, the single select property doesn't really mean anything other than what the user or the creator wants it to mean. The checkbox property doesn't really mean anything. The properties that Notion has given us in the past have always been flexible enough that we could make them mean whatever we wanted them to mean. However, with this new status property, for the first time we have more app-like functionality, a property that actually has a defined purpose that we can't change. We can't go in there and add more groups or change the name of the groups. We're stuck with to do, in progress, and complete. So it's very clear that this new property has a specific and intended purpose given to us by Notion. Now, I'm not complaining about that. Like I said, I think this is a great property. I just think it's a little odd because it's kind of out of style for Notion, you know? Now, this status property is a very minor update. In the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't change a whole lot, but I think this is a small glimpse of what we can expect from Notion in the future. You know, we've had a lot of big Notion announcements in the past few months. Notion has purchased automate.io. They've recently purchased the calendar app Cron. They are growing exponentially, and I think we are going to see a lot more properties like this come out in the future that are more native app-like, you could say. Maybe more properties that integrate well with Cron, or that link up really well with other programs through features kind of like Automate.io. If we do start to see more features like this and more properties that do have intended functions, it could really expand Notion into a completely different kind of app. It will be a lot more user-friendly for people who just want to jump in and get started using it. And it could allow Notion creators and Notion engineers to build really cool apps and really cool templates with a lot more functionality than we've seen in the past. I'm really excited to see how Notion continues to grow from here. I'm excited to see what other properties they have planned for us, how they plan to incorporate Cron and Automate.io into the Notion universe. I have a good feeling about this, and I think it's a very good time to be a Notion user. But I want to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this new status property. Are you planning on using it in the future? Are you planning on updating your past databases? And I want to know what you think this means for Notion. You can also follow me on Twitter at HeyTylerMartin. I look forward to engaging with you over there. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will catch you in the next one.